Hello love, and welcome back for another video. I'm so thankful that you clicked on this video, and today we're going to be going through the 4 books that I read during 2020. I am really excited to review these books with you, and I hope that you'll like it. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. I'm really sad that I only read 4 books, but that's reality. That is the way that 2020 probably treated most of you out there. I look forward to a hopefully better 2021. We'll see. We have hope in Christ no matter what, so we are totally secure. Thank God for that. Let's get right into it. The first book that I read, and I'll have pictures of them on the screen so that you can see the cover. Good Morning, Good Life by Amy Landino, and 5 Simple Habits to Master Your Mornings and Upgrade Your Life. I loved this book. I got this for Christmas, 2019 Christmas. I read it in January of this year, and I loved it. This book is what inspired my morning routine that I was talking about in our last video, Setting Spiritual Goals. I'm just going to describe a little bit about what I loved about Amy's book. So this is a secular book written by a secular author, not biblically based, but when I read it, I of course read it from my perspective, which is a biblical perspective. So I was searching for ways to apply this to my relationship with God when I picked it up to begin with. When I got it as a gift, I wanted it so that I could focus on spending time with God in the mornings. In our last video, I told you that I struggled to have consistent quiet times with God, and this was one thing that set me up for a really good 2020. It wasn't until March, the quarantine business, that changed. So before that, I was on a really good routine, and I credit that to this book by Amy Landino. So let's talk about some highs and some lows from this book. Some highs. The book walks you through 5 chapters. It doesn't sound like much. This is what it looks like, about how thick it is. It takes you through 5 chapters, and the first one is to decide. So decide why you want to have a morning routine. She explains the benefits of having one, why you should consider it, so on and so forth. The second chapter is to defy. So think about the obstacles in your way of having a good morning routine. And the next is rise. So decide what time you're going to get up and actually get up. And then the next one is shine. So rise and shine, haha, cute. For the shine chapter, she basically explains what you're gonna do once you're up. And I remember she started that chapter by saying, the hardest part is over. You set the time, you actually got up, you're awake. Now what do? So the last chapter, chapter 5, is to thrive. So then she describes the benefits of having a good morning routine and what the morning routine could do for you if you really committed to it. I read this book with the biblical perspective that I wanted to focus it on my quiet times with the Lord. That was the whole point. So my decide for chapter 1, my why, the reason that I wanted a morning routine was to have time alone to connect with God, completely uninterrupted. I loved the defy chapter because it made me answer the questions that she asked at the end of the chapter, and they were like, what are 2 obstacles that get in your way when you're awake in the morning and you're trying to have a morning routine? What are the things you need to eliminate? For me, it was my phone, and at the time, my dog Camper would always come in there and, begging for food, wanted to go outside, all of that stuff. So she gives you practical steps on how to defy all of those obstacles. Loved that chapter. That was definitely a high. A low for this book would be, it really wasn't very biblically based, and I already said that once, but it's true. I wish that there was a book that talked about morning routines for believers specifically, but unfortunately there is not. The next book I read during 2020 is Winter Solstice by Ellen Hilderbrand. This was my first book to read by her. I got it on sale at Books A Million. Loved it. It was so good. It almost seemed like it was part of a series, and turns out she does offer several series. She has one series called the Paradise series, and I recently accidentally bought the second book to that series, so way to go. But I loved this book. It's a fiction book, so that last book was a nonfiction book and this is a fiction book. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was such a good story. It did have, you know, a bit of like sadness, like some difficult things, some difficult decisions and such like that, but that made the story so rich and so real. Highly recommend Winter Solstice. It takes place on Nantucket Island. I didn't even know that was a real place. Really good book. The next book is You Are Not Enough by Allie Beth Stuckey. Oh, You're Not Enough and That's Okay by Allie Beth Stuckey. I loved this book. If you struggle to understand how to examine some of the political issues that the world experiences right now, look at that from a biblical perspective, this is the book for you. Allie does such a good job at explaining why we are not enough, why we were never meant to be enough. So good. And she basically takes 5 myths that the culture tells you. The first myth is you are enough. The second one is you determine your truth. We've all heard that one a couple times. Myth 3 is you're perfect the way that you are. Myth 4 is you're entitled to your dreams. Myth number 5, you can't love others until you love yourself. If you've never heard anyone say that to you, you must not get out much, because I think I've been hearing that since early middle school years. These are myths that Christians fail to identify as myths. Let me explain. I see so often on social media Christian women, believers, that get on their stories or post something on Instagram talking about how they just needed some me time. They needed to focus on themselves to better themselves, and then they'll be able to revisit a situation in a better mindset. That doesn't sound bad at all, does it? It doesn't sound bad. It sounds perfectly fine. The problem is you're not entitled to your dreams. You're not perfect the way that you are. You don't determine truth. And you don't need to love yourself before you can love others. That's the problem. And whenever Christian women decide that we're going to start believing these myths, we're defying the Bible. And that's exactly what Allie Beth explains in this book. It's so good. She is so knowledgeable about what culture is saying and explains it in such a good way using the Bible. She explains it from a biblical worldview, and that's exactly what we need as believers. This book called me out, especially the chapter on you're entitled to your dreams. We hear our entire life, whatever you set your mind to, you can do it. If you want it, you set your sights on it and you go get it. And that's what we're told. That's what we believe. That's not biblical. You don't get to choose what you get to do. You have the choice. But as a biblical woman, you should be striving for what God has for you, not for what you have for yourself. I promise you what God has is going to be better. And that's why it's so important that we live obedient lives, walking in faith, making sure that our relationship with Christ is healthy. Highly recommend Allie Beth Stuckey's book, You're Not Enough and That's Okay. I am going to link all of the books below in the description box. Hopefully they are all on Amazon and you can buy them there if you would like. The last book is a book by a new author that I had never heard of until the end of November this year. Julie, I'm going to say Klassen. It's in the description box, so correct me if I'm wrong. Julie Klassen. This is An Ivy Hill Christmas. Such a sweet novel. I did read it for the month of December. This was my book. Funny story. I was at church fixing to head upstairs to work with the kids on a Wednesday night, and a sweet lady from my church was having a book club in the downstairs office, and I ran in there accidentally and interrupted their book club, but she gave me a copy of Julie Clason's book, An Ivy Hill Christmas. This was their November book that they read. It was so good. I'm so happy that she gave it to me. It was such a good story. Julie Clayson is a Christian, so there are biblical tones in the book, which is definitely a high. I honestly don't have any lows for you. It was such a sweet story with still a bit of reality, but it wasn't crushing stories. You know what I mean? You definitely know what I'm talking about. It wasn't like watching Law and Order SVU and being horrified at what's happening. There was not that at all. It was a sweet story, not quite Hallmark level. It wasn't just happiness and rainbows, but it was really good. I highly recommend. Christmas is technically over, New Year's is right around the corner, but never feel out of place reading a Christmas novel. This one is so good, so good. Highly recommend. Those were my 4 books that I read this year. I've recently set a New Year's goal to read 15 books in 2021. Hopefully that will work out and nothing will keep me from being able to buy books or invest in books like this year. I hope that you enjoyed this video and these book reviews. I wish that it could be a bit more in-depth, but I don't think anyone wants to watch a 30-minute video on books. If you enjoyed this video, please like it down below and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any more videos whenever we sit down for another conversation. And I'll see you next time.